So, in today's episode, I really want to talk to you about the different types of narcissists that you can get. And I get lots of questions sent to me asking me, is my ex a grandiose narcissist? Are they a covert? My mum is an overt narcissist. And there's all these bits of terminology, isn't there? And it can get really, really confusing. And I think one of the things that I'd like to talk about in this episode is really what I think are the different types of narcissists that you can get. And I'm going to break each one down for you. And again, you can go on Google and you can Google all of these, and you'll find some people say that there's 4 or 8 or however many there are. I think there are 10. And I'm going to break that down for you because we have kind of like the main types, the core 4. And then there are subtypes, 3 different subtypes. And I want to break all of those down for you. And I would love to know, as I'm talking about them, maybe let me know, maybe drop me an email at hello@carolinestrawson.com, or if you're following me on Instagram or Facebook, maybe just drop me a message or comment on one of my posts and say, hey, I've just listened to your episode and I think my mother is a vulnerable, covert, somatic narcissist, okay? Or whatever you think the narcissist in your life is. So I'm going to break them down for you. So to start off with, I talk about the 4 main types, and these are broken down into grandiose, communal, malignant, and vulnerable. And they're the kind of main 4 types. So we have the grandiose, and that's probably one of the ones you've probably heard of the most, maybe along with malignant. And a grandiose narcissist really exhibits that kind of classic narcissistic behavior. You know, that person who walks into a room and just really commands that attention. I'm sure you can think of many people that you have seen on the TV, maybe, or that you know that would maybe be classified as that grandiose narcissist. They're highly functioning, they're really exhibitionistic in nature, and you just know when you meet them that they have that kind of air about them, that grandiosity. Then we have malignant narcissists. So malignant narcissists are really, really toxic. They are really highly manipulative, can almost then start to go into the dangerous types of narcissist as well. They exploit others, typically for pleasure. They're really malignant. I mean, just even saying that word, it kind of encompasses malignant narcissist. You know, it really does. And I'm sure many of you will have had contact with a malignant narcissist. Then we have a vulnerable narcissist, maybe one that we don't really heard talked about much, because that does kind of dip into the covert narcissist as well, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the vulnerable narcissist is really fragile. They are really compensatory or closet narcissists, maybe not the sort that you would expect to be classified as narcissists. And when we talk about vulnerable narcissists going into the covert narcissist too, this is what makes it really, really challenging. Now we've medicalized narcissistic personality disorder, because having medicalized NPD, what we've done is we've listed 9 traits that are in the DSM, that diagnostical and statistical manual that the mental health professionals use to diagnose narcissistic personality disorder. And there are 9 traits in there, of which you have to have 5 or more to be classified or diagnosed as a narcissist with NPD. But really that vulnerable covert doesn't necessarily fit into those 9 traits that are listed in the DSM. And this is where the problem lies, because many of us have relationships with narcissists, and then if you go and look at the DSM and people say, well, have you got a diagnosis? And then you start to think, well, is it me? Am I the crazy one? Is there something wrong? And really, for me, I think it's a real disservice in some respects. And I've done other episodes on what I classify a narcissist as. And again, I use a lot of internal family systems, parts therapy, to talk about that kind of umbrella term of an individual's protector parts, which could be abusive. And we then classify that as a narcissist, so to speak. It's like an umbrella term. But that vulnerable narcissist is really one that's someone who's more introverted. They don't like to be the center of attention. So almost the complete opposite then of that grandiose narcissist too. But they can be really hard to spot, and that can make it really, really challenging then if you're going through narcissistic abuse. And then we have the communal narcissist, a really, really interesting traits. around a communal narcissist, because they're kind of these do-gooders that are really looking for validation for helping others. Now, funnily enough, in my narcissistic trauma-informed coaching certifications, I actually teach others to do this work. There's a number of people in there now that are actually looking at religious trauma with regards to narcissism, because again, a lot of people in that religious community, that position of power, the helping of others, they can actually be narcissists. And I've worked with clients whose other halves are very high up in that religious state within their community. And that can make it really, really challenging for them, because what do? Do they kind of say, hey, that person who you all think is amazing is actually a narcissist and they're abusing me? Because very often then someone's going to think, well, no one's going to believe me. And it can make it really, really challenging. So again, that grandiose, malignant narcissist, they can be very overt in their behavior, but the vulnerable and communal, the do-gooder, the victim-like, that one that's more introverted, not wanting to be center of attention, that can make it really, really challenging for somebody, because they're not really what your typical narcissist would necessarily look like from a societal perspective, because we don't necessarily think, when you think of Narcissus, that Greek god who loved their reflection, that's the kind of narcissist we think of, isn't it? But there are so many parameters to this. And this is why, videos and podcast episodes like this are so vitally important, because my ex-husband was a covert narcissist, and that now moves on into the next subtype, covert and overt. Now, a covert narcissist, again, is somebody who uses real stealth-like methods, secretive, that behind closed doors, they behave very, very differently to out in public. Again, very victim-like. You often find a crossover between a vulnerable and a covert narcissist. They go very much hand in hand. And again, I know from my perspective to the outside world, we look like this idyllic family. Yet behind closed doors, it was very, very different. And that can make it really challenging. Because if I was going outside saying, hey, he's behaving like this and he's saying this to me, and people are going to think, well, he doesn't act like that. They're going to start thinking I'm the crazy one. So guess what I used to do? I used to isolate and retreat even more. I didn't go out much. And if I did, I had a smiley face on. I put my makeup on, and outside that door I'd go, and anyone say, how are you, Caroline? Hey, I'm fine. The I'm fine, which is code for I'm dying inside. But of course, nobody saw that. So the covert narcissist, again, is somebody who acts very much victim-like. I've had a number of covert narcissistic friends as well that would come across as somebody who is almost the victim and needs that narcissistic supply, but it just looks like they need that reassurance. So these are very subtle changes, because of course you can have somebody who is like that isn't a narcissist. So this is what makes it really challenging, and those slight nuances around all of that we need to be aware of, so that we can spot that covert narcissist. I'm always a big believer of if somebody is telling you something, look at their body language. I know, had I been around people who were trauma informed when I was in my marriage, they would have spotted it a mile off, because the words didn't match my body. They didn't match my actual responses that were going on. And this is why being trauma informed is so important. Then we have the overt narcissist. Again, very much can go hand in hand with the grandiose and malignant, that kind of, hey, look at me, I am here kind of narcissist. Again, the sort that we would really recognize as being a narcissist. And they will use methods that are really, really obvious. They are open for everybody to see. And again, there will be crossovers. So you can definitely have your malignant going into overt. You can have your grandiose going into the overt. You wouldn't really have the malignant and grandiose being covert. That just wouldn't go hand in hand. They're polar opposites of each other for that. Then moving into the next subtype 2. And this is really what the narcissist describes and values the most in himself or herself. And that is either the somatic or the cerebral. So the somatic narcissist is really obsessed with their body, really obsessed with their appearance. They spend a lot of time at the gym or in the mirrors. And I wish I'd have known this when I was married. My ex-husband used to take longer than I did to get ready. he used to change his clothes maybe 3 or 4 times a day. And yes, the industry that we worked in was very appearance based. We had to present ourselves in a certain way. But to spend that amount of time on your eyebrows or in the mirror, changing clothes, I didn't see it. But it's only now when I look back that actually how much he valued his appearance, and actually how much he valued my appearance of feeling like, I've got Caroline on my arm. And it was how he looked. There was many occasions where this must have been a nightmare for him, where people would kind of say to him, hey, you're punching above your station. Hey, you're really, really lucky. And whilst outwardly that would be really rewarding to him to know that we were together, but actually inwardly for him, he'd need more supply then. He would absolutely need more supply, because that to him would mean, well, hold on, she's better than me. No, 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 no. That means I'm worth the less than her. And that's when he'd need to get that supply. And then we have the cerebral narcissist, really using academia and brains, and they see themselves as more intelligent than other people. Now, yes, this can happen in everyday life anyway, can't it? But it's someone who really, really values their accomplishments, that position of power, that cerebral element, using the brain. They're the most intelligent ones in the room. They're trying to impress people all of the time. And again, these are really subtle nuances. I work really hard. I'm a closet learner, and I always will be. That doesn't mean that I'm a cerebral narcissist. So again, these are those little nuances that when you're with people like this, and again, you might be watching this episode and listening to this right now and thinking, well, okay, my husband, my wife, my mum, my dad is always going on about trying to be better than somebody else around academics, around running a business, and they're using their brain for that. So is it kind of like the brains, or is it the kind of looks? So you can have those two different subtypes, the somatic or the cerebral. And then the third subtype is really about looking now at the sadistic and inverted types of narcissist. That sadistic narcissist that really gains pleasure in watching other people's pain, that really goes hand in hand with malignant, and you can often find the grandiose, the overt narcissist can tip into this category. This is when we start to look at psychopathy and sociopathy as well. Now, that doesn't mean all narcissists are sociopaths or psychopaths. Absolutely not. But pretty much every psychopath and sociopath will be narcissistic in nature as well. So the sadistic narcissist is very much seeking pleasure from your pain. And then the inverted one is very much that victim mindset, really suffering from that child abandonment. So again, you can see almost how the main types and the subtypes of covert, overt, somatic, cerebral, sadistic, and inverted, how they can kind of go all hand in hand. So you could kind of have a vulnerable, cerebral, covert, inverted narcissist. And that doesn't mean from each category they have to fall into that. I often just talk about my ex being a covert narcissist, for instance. So it's not often I bring in the somatic element, for instance, or the vulnerable element, or the inverted. But I thought it was really important to do an episode where I kind of broke all of those down for you to see maybe the person that is in your life who's the narcissist. What subtype, what main type of narcissist do they fall into? Grandiose, malignant, communal, vulnerable, and then covert and overt, somatic or cerebral, sadistic or inverted. Now, it doesn't mean they have to fall in all of them. There might just be one that literally, as I'm talking about, you're going, oh my goodness, that's my ex, or oh my goodness, that's my mum. And you may find one that really jumps out to you. Equally, I'd really love to know if me sharing all of this has been really enlightening for you in really being able to look at the narcissist in your life. Because, one of the things, and I was certainly like this, was when I came out of my marriage, I didn't even think I'd been in an abusive relationship. I was literally a shell of myself. I'd got complex PTSD, depression, anxiety. I was self-harming. And I was blaming myself. I was just so full of shame. My kids were now in a broken home. And I didn't really understand all of this language. I didn't understand trauma. I didn't think I'd had trauma. I didn't think I'd been abused. And it was only when I started to do my inner work. So I equally know these episodes aren't just for those of you who really recognize that there's a narcissist in your life, but equally for those of you, and this is one of the reasons I do all of this stuff, is to educate, because you deserve to live an amazing life. And if you're feeling a certain way in your body, where you're feeling blocked, or you're feeling tense, or you're feeling anxious or depressed, or any of those parts of you that are showing up, then let's get curious. And one of the key things to look at is, who you're surrounding yourself with the majority of the time, looking at your relationships, not only just with your family, but also your partnerships as well. How are your partners leaving you feeling? And just by doing episodes like this, where you can start to maybe piece this all together, so that you can start to realize this is not your fault, because it isn't. How you are right now are really trauma responses to your perception of danger, and staying in a relationship with a narcissist doesn't mean you're weak. It just means for you, because of your responses, your past experiences, it actually feels safer to stay. So I hope that was enlightening. I talk about 10 different types of narcissists. Which ones can you relate to with the narcissist in your life? Maybe drop me a message, let me know. And I hope that was really educational for you. And I shall see you on the next episode.